Simply Financial with Christopher Calandra, Certified Financial Planner, is an innovative, comprehensive, informative, and cutting-edge podcast that discusses financial topics ranging from personal finance, economics, politics, and personal growth. Simply Financial will cover intriguing and thought-provoking questions so that the listener can simply increase their financial IQ.
Welcome to this episode of the Simply Financial podcast. We're in season number 3. This is episode number 21. And hopefully you've been listening the last couple of weeks. We are doing a 5-part series, Battle of the Sexes. I'm your host, Christopher Calandra. In the first 2 episodes of the 5-part series, I had on my wife, Joelle, and we talked about money in marriage and covered a wide-ranging discussion related to money inside of a relationship. And for the 3rd installment, I have with me Lindy Brock, who is in Connecticut, in studio, traveled from Florida. We're doing a big client event tonight, so we thought we would get her thoughts and just kick around some ideas about money in marriage. So, thanks, Lindy.
I'm excited to be here with you again.
So I want to pepper you with some questions. There's some things I think I know about you and your husband, DJ.
You think?
I think, but we'll find out. And then maybe you could ask me some questions. Hopefully this will go as well as I think it will. Let me kick it off by asking you, how much cash do you typically carry around?
Not much at all. We're horrible, me and my husband both, at putting money in our wallets. The only reason that I tend to carry cash is if my kids are going to need something for school or, I don't know, just something that they go to with their friends.
So you traveled from Florida to Connecticut, got on a plane, we picked you up at the airport, we've been bouncing around Connecticut doing meetings and such this week. How much cash did you bring with you?
$25.
Wow, okay.
And I was lucky to have that on me, and it was just because my kids have given me some money to hold on to for them, and then I credit their allowance accounts. So.
Okay. We're going to come back to allowance in a future episode with the kids, but do you do research before making major purchases?
We do. We tend to. My husband is much better at that than I am. He is a researchaholic, and Google is his best friend. He talks to people. He Googles things. He spends hours of research. We had just got the grill.
Right.
So we did this pellet grill, and we had been kicking around this idea for a couple months, and it took us a couple months to make that decision because he had to talk to people and he had to do the research and read the reviews and watch videos on it. I mean, okay. I rely on him heavily for that.
So is there a point where you say, hey, it's decision time, or do you buy into the process? And I think he sort of enjoys it too, right? Mm-hmm. Digging into that kind of thing. But is there ever a time when you're like, all right, listen, time out. It's decision time. Does that happen occasionally? Or you let it just run through?
I usually just let it run through the process.
Okay.
It only really, if it comes down to, okay, now we need this.
Right.
If it's not a want, if it's a need, then obviously we have to make a decision quicker.
And are you happy with the decision with the grill?
I am. It's a wonderful grill.
And he's even happier, right?
Oh my gosh, yes.
Awesome. Now, are you a spender or a saver?
I think other people would classify me as a saver, but I don't think that I save enough. I think I go more towards the spending, but I think I'm a happy medium.
Okay. And how would you describe DJ?
He's a saver. Yes. A lot of his buddies tease him because they say that he's cheap. He doesn't want to, spend money on anything, but he is very willing to make purchases. He just wants to make good purchases that are very well thought out.
So he's not an impulse buyer?
No.
Especially with things that have bigger ticket items?
Yes.
Because he's going to do that research.
Yes.
And deliberate about it.
Yeah.
All right, cool.
I'm more of the impulse buyer. And that's why we get along very well, because I need that balance in my life.
Perfect. So Joelle and I talked a lot. We did 2 episodes. I don't think you've listened to either of them yet. So we talked a lot about one person handling the finances and kind of how to balance it out in a marriage, and talked a lot about our strategy and what's worked for us. Our situation's a little different. We got married relatively young based on today's standards. I was 25 and she was 24, which I guess isn't that young, but seems young by today's norms, I guess, a little bit. So what are your feelings about one person handling all the finances? Because you know as well as I do, we meet a lot of people in the course of our business advising individuals, couples, and families where you'll have a couple and one person, stereotypically it's the female, the wife doesn't know anything about the money and the finances. How do you feel about that? Not so much what's going on in your household, which I want to get to, but how do you feel about that where, excuse me, where one person handles all the finances and the other person is in the dark?
I definitely don't think that's a good idea. And it comes down to the lack of communication. Because being a couple, you need to communicate. You need to be able to rely on each other for joint decisions, big decisions. And if one person is completely in the dark, they don't have the information available to them to make a good decision. So they could have different feelings, or they could want different things, but without the communication from the other person or the knowledge of what they have, they can't make any kind of decision.
But does it surprise you where you still see an awful lot of wives are in the dark? And it's not because the husbands necessarily want them to be in the dark. It's mostly just willful. Joelle and I talked about this. You know, divide and conquer. There's things that she largely handles in our household, and there's things that I'm largely responsible for. And we do have checks and balances. But does it surprise you how many women are intentionally in the dark? Does that surprise you how often that occurs?
It does. And I know you keep saying women, but there's also men in that situation. And I think it boils down to they don't want to deal with it. They don't want to be responsible for it. They don't want to be responsible if something goes wrong and have that fall on their back. I definitely think it's an intentional choice. I don't think it's a good choice, though.
It's definitely not a good choice. I agree 100%. And we've seen, and I've seen because I've been in the business longer than you have, lots of instances where this catches up in a number of ways, including if there's a health crisis, an emergency, or a passing, that then you not only are mourning the loss of a loved one and a life partner, but then there's the financial pressure of not knowing where money is, how much there is, where it comes from, why it's positioned where it is, and it really makes for a stressful, pressure-packed situation.
Right, and if they don't have any idea on the assets, they probably don't have any idea on the budget or any of their expenses, so they have no idea of how it comes together and really how to handle anything after somebody passes or something happens like that.
Yeah, and it's I find it sad to see.
Yeah.
And what we talked about, what Joelle and I talked about with our checks and balances in our house, we're not suggesting that both parties need to know everything and do everything side by side every single day, paying the bills together and tracking investments together. It doesn't need to be that.
Right.
But there has to be a way that there's a baseline of communication. I love that word that you used. So that there's an awareness, a basic understanding of how things are structured, where the money is, and just a foundational understanding goes a long, long way. So that's great. And I should have done this. I'm going out of order, so bear with me, Lindy. We talked about big purchases. Mm-hmm. Should you consult one another before making big purchases? How do you guys do that with you and DJ as an example? How does that work?
It's a little bit different on our side because we do separate all of our money.
Okay.
So if it is a joint purchase, a big joint purchase, then yeah, we're going to discuss it because we both have to contribute to that big purchase. We have to. Mm-hmm. If one of us wants to get something for ourselves that's a bigger purchase, there's times when we consult with each other, but other times when we don't because we don't really share the assets.
Okay. So, as you know, Joelle and I, all of our money goes into one pot. Everything is joint. There's no separate checking accounts, no separate pools of money. And so that's how we've always structured things over the 23 years of marriage in August of this year. So you guys do things differently. So you have your checking account, savings account, you have your money.
Yep.
And then he has his, and money that you earn goes into your account.
Yep.
And there isn't a common joint account.
No.
Which is, I think, seems to me more popular, I guess is the right word, where a couple have, he has his account, she has her account, but then there's also a joint account. It's the his, hers, and ours model. So you keep things separate, and with that comes a lot of independence so that if you want to purchase something, even a large ticket item, you have the freedom. What works within your relationship is it's your money, mm-hmm. and you can make the buying decision. But is it fair to say a lot of times with bigger ticket items that it's going to be jointly because you guys are going to go into it together?
Yeah.
So what's an example? What would be a hypothetical or even a real life example of a big ticket item that you might buy or DJ may buy that there would not be much communication because either you or he are using your own money and are going to make the decision and spend the money?
So a big purchase from a couple years ago, I had bought we hunt, so I bought a new tree stand. And a tree stand is a couple $100.
Okay.
And it's for me only. He's not going to be using it at all. And I made the decision. I sort of consulted him just for his opinion on which one I should get, but I didn't check with him to see if it was okay. Or to see what he thought about me getting a new one. He just trusts me that I needed a new one and I have the money and we're good to go.
So big ticket item in a household is a car, vehicles.
Yeah.
So are they done individually or are they done within the joint construct where you guys work out a budget and then decide how much is going to be contributed? Walk me through that.
Again, that was pretty separate. When he wants a new truck, or I got a new truck a couple years ago, I told him I wanted to get a new truck. He's like, okay. And we go to the car dealership and we looked together. He knows that I pay that myself, so I basically work out the budget myself, what I feel comfortable paying, and then he helps me make the decision because it's more the research area. King.
Yeah, right.
So he helps me make the decision, and then he's a great negotiator. So I love to bring him to stuff like that because he helps me negotiate prices. But the decision was completely mine when it came down to it because it's my money that's paying for it.
Okay. And if you were looking to do something, stick with the vehicle front, and I believe this is hypothetical, I don't think this has happened, but just walk me through how you would think about it, is if you were you said, all right, here's what I want to do vehicle-wise, and he disagreed. I'm talking more price-wise, not an SUV versus sedan or anything like that, but price-wise. Let's say you were going to spend an amount of money that for whatever reason he felt uncomfortable with. Or it could be the other side. You wanted to buy, a jalopy and he didn't agree with that. So if he gives you feedback on that, it's your decision. Mm-hmm. But how much weight does that get?
A lot. It was funny, a couple months ago, I was just looking around at different vehicles again, and it's been only a year since I got my truck. And so I'm kicking around things to him. Well, I could build this vehicle and it could be completely mine. I've never gotten a brand new vehicle before. And, I'm finally able to do this. And he's like, so, really? You just got a truck a year ago. Like, really?
Okay.
And it did carry a lot of weight because I'm like, okay, now I'm just being silly. I did get a truck a year ago. I got a truck for a reason.
So that goes back to that spender, saver kind of thing.
Exactly.
But what's interesting is that Joelle and I do things very different from at least the structure part. But at the same time, the communication that she and I have, the decision making, is largely the same. Which, candidly, is a little bit surprising because I only know the way that I've done it, and we've done it for so long, and we don't know anything different. But, in just speaking with you, it does seem that because the communication is good, and you know your strengths and weaknesses, and you respect one another, and you know one another's strengths and weaknesses, that the decision-making process and where you end up is very, very similar to Joelle and I, even though we don't have separate accounts. So I think that's pretty neat.
Well, it seems like it comes down to the communication and being able to trust each other. Not only with the other person's feedback on your decision, but trusting the other person to make appropriate financial decisions. And if you have that trust and that communication, I think you're set up for success.
Yeah, how you do it doesn't matter that much.
Yeah, the structure doesn't matter.
So, again, I'm just curious because it's a little like just different for me. Does he know how much you have, say, in the bank? And don't tell us how much. And do you know how much he has in the bank?
Yes.
Okay.
And really the only reason why is because I communicate my side to him. Because I think that he should know.
Right.
And again, it sort of helps balance me and it gives me accountability to where I feel like I should keep up with him because he's the saver. So if I don't have as much as he does, it gives me sort of a kick in the butt to get my stuff in gear. But I know his side because I do the balance sheet.
The net worth statement.
Or the net worth statement, yeah. Every single, I've been doing it more monthly. So I have to ask him what he has. And he's more than happy to tell me.
Right. And does he review that? You prepare it.
Yeah.
But does he review that with you?
Not really.
Not really?
No, I tell him.
Do you tell him the number?
I do, because I think that he should know.
And he says, oh, that's great, but he's not...
Yeah.
Okay. So it's funny, because you're the wife and I'm the husband in our relationship, but like, Joelle and I joke, like, I love to do the net worth statement. I'm such a geek. I love to do the net worth statement. I do a quarterly. Not that everybody should do a quarterly, but like when the quarter comes to an end, I'm like, I get to do the net worth statement. It's silly, but it is me. And then that's one of the checks and balances that we have with Joelle is because, number one, in a crisis, in an emergency, she could go to that net worth statement, which is set up as a spreadsheet. And boy, that would go a long way to her figuring out where things are.
Yes.
And then with that, it's a chance for me to say how we're doing because in our household, it's combined finances, but I make most of the day-to-day decisions on how much get invested here and there and mortgages and the HSA and all of that stuff. That's my domain. But when we review that, when we review the net worth statement, that's a chance to kind of share and let her know, here's what I'm thinking of doing, here's what we've accomplished, here's what I think is going to be next. But I'm way more into this conversation than she is. I mean, way more. And to the point where we've had arguments about it because I'll be like, can I have like 5 minutes for you to just pay attention to this? And for her, She's like, Chris, you're on top of it. I trust you completely. You're so excited about this. I know we're in good hands.
And
I
she
know what I
trusts
need
you.
to know. I'm ready to move on.
Yeah.
And I want to share. Maybe it's a little showing off, whatever, just because I like talking about this. But she is like, can I go now?
Yeah. And that's
D-
sort of
DJ
how it is.
has that role.
Exactly. And I think it boils down to, like you said, like, this is what we do. And so we're going to be excited about it. And they're just like, okay, I trust you. You've got this.
So when you meet with, in your role as a financial advisor at LA Wealth Management, and whether you're doing the meeting on your own or you and I are doing it together, and we meet, let's say a younger couple, because older couples, it's a little bit different, but let's just say a younger couple, first time marriage, no children, traditional kind of setup. If they asked your advice, they said, listen, we're getting married, we're going to have children someday, we're starting to build our life together, what should we do? Should we do it Chris and Joelle's way? Should we do it your way and DJ's way? Or call the middle ground the mine, yours, ours model? What would you say to them?
It's really a personal preference and what works for them and what they're comfortable with. I would definitely stress, no matter what decision you make, because it's not my decision, but it's your decision. And whatever choice you make, you have to communicate everything. That is the key to making everything work.
Right. No secrets.
Exactly. And, if somebody's better with like Joelle, she does the accounting and stuff like that. If somebody's better at something, definitely they should handle that part. If both people aren't really good at anything, they should probably work together on everything to figure it out. So it's really, preferences and who's comfortable with what, and maybe what they grew up with, what they know.
Sure. Mm-hmm. No, that's a good point. But the keys, regardless of the three, we've already hit on them. You need to communicate. There shouldn't be secrets. Even if you have the separate accounts, that doesn't mean that you have them locked in a drawer, that your husband and or your wife, that they don't see, that you don't share with them how much you make or how much you have in debt. That would fall under,
yes.
Joelle and I talked about the term financial infidelity. Mm-hmm. And, there's a certain amount, like Joelle and I joked, I usually have a stash of cash. That's a couple $100. We're not talking thousands of dollars.
Right.
But I have, when I'm on the road, I don't want to have just $25.
They have ATMs everywhere. Come on.
They have ATMs everywhere. But also in a business setting, if I ever needed cash. So I usually have that amount of money. And she knows I have that money. She doesn't know how much it is.
She doesn't need to know.
Even at this point, she kind of knows where it is if she wanted it. But even if she didn't know about that and it was a couple $100, I don't think that's financial infidelity. I'm doing that as a convenience for things. And actually, most times with that cash, I didn't even say to her, that's what I'll use to buy gifts for her. Mm-hmm. Because she sees everything.
Exactly, yeah.
Because she sees the credit card and she breaks down all the numbers and we keep a tight tracking of all of that. It kind of sucks the romantic aspect of it if I buy her a gift and she sees it on the credit card before the gift comes, or I give her the gift and then later she says, oh, it was that much money. So I'll often use that money ultimately to pay cash just to keep it from being seen. And that might be even a little silly in and of itself. But to me, that's couples doing that's no big deal. Small potatoes. But there's couples that hide credit cards. Mm-hmm. That Joelle and I were talking, and we actually have to talk about this off air because we know of someone, I know of someone, and she knows them, where the wife has, I forget what it was, $40,000, $50,000, $60,000 bank account that the husband doesn't know about because she doesn't agree with what they're doing money-wise and this, that, the other thing.
What if something happens to her?
I agree. And Joelle actually said, oh, I know somebody even that you also know that is doing the same thing, but in this instance it was the man. I might be reversing some of these numbers and stuff, but that's financial infidelity.
Yeah,
that's not
crazy.
healthy. that's not going to lead to good marriage success, and you're probably not going to win with money if you need to be hiding either assets or debts or your income or anything like that. So regardless of the three broad choices, you can't be keeping secrets.
Right.
So as we kind of wrap up, anything else you wanted to say about, you fight about money a lot?
We don't ever fight about money. And that's why we set it up the way we did. This is both our second marriage. And in our previous marriage, we combined money with our spouse.
Oh, okay.
And fought with our spouses all the time about money. In my case, my ex knew nothing about the finances. Let me handle the bills, let me handle all the paychecks, let me handle everything. And it crushed me when he would want to make a big purchase or something, and we wouldn't have the money, and I'd have to break that to him. But he had no idea because...
Right, but then that's putting you in a position where you're the giver of the money and the giver of the joy.
Right.
And that's not fair for one party in a relationship to have that power, but also that pressure.
Right.
This is a team sport.
Yeah. And because we fought, and my husband fought with his ex about money, we made the decision when we got together, we're like, we're just gonna keep it separate.
And it works.
And it works.
Great. Good.
And we communicate. And I think now, even if we combined money, I think we would be fine because we have that open communication. But we like it as is, and yeah, it works.
Very good. Wonderful discussion. Listeners, we're going to be back with you. The next two installments of the 5-part series is going to be focused more on teaching children about money. And so Joelle and I are going to be doing an episode on that, and then separately Lindy and I are going to be doing an episode on that. I think it's going to be really, really good stuff. So please listen in on this series. Subscribe to the podcast. You could do that by going to iTunes and Stitcher and other platforms, but also at our website, www.elliottwealth.com, where you could get more information about our financial planning and investment management services. Please sign up for an initial consultation if you're not a client of ours already. Thanks very much. We'll be back with you next week on the next edition of the Simply Financial Podcast.
The views expressed are not necessarily the opinion of SagePoint Financial Incorporated and should not be construed directly or indirectly as an offer to buy or sell any securities mentioned herein. Investing is subject to risks, including loss of principal invested. Past performance is not a guarantee of future results. No strategy can assure a profit nor protect against loss. Please note that individual situations can vary. Therefore, the information should be relied upon when coordinated with individual professional advice. Please note, the information being provided is strictly as a courtesy. When you link to any of the websites provided here, you are leaving this website. We make no representation as to the completeness or accuracy of the information provided at these websites, nor is the company liable for any direct or indirect technical or system issues or any consequences arising out of your access to your use of third-party technologies, websites, information, and programs made available through this website. When you access one of these websites, you are leaving our website and assume total responsibility and risk for your use of the websites you are linking to. Securities and advisory services are offered through SagePoint Financial Incorporated, member FINRA SIPC. Insurance services offered through Elliott Wealth Management, LLC, not affiliated with SagePoint Financial.
Simply Financial is part of the Exvadio Podcast Network. You can find Exvadio podcasts at exvadio.com/podcast, the Apple Podcasts app, iTunes Store, iHeartRadio app, Spotify, Stitcher, and wherever you find podcasts. So join us and stay informed and entertained.